With Russia rejecting a ceasefire and peace talks in Budapest collapsing, fears are now growing that the war in Ukraine could stretch on for even longer. Sultan Chief Strategist of the Sultan Interactive Group joins us now to discuss what's led to the breakdown on this latest peace summit that was meant to happen in Budapest.
So it's a multitude of things. We've had interactions from both sides, from Ukraine and Russia. We've had war posturing from Macron all the way over in France, who's talking about the potential for a huge war starting in 2026, meaning that Europe is pushing overtures. We've heard from Ursula von Leyen, who's the head of the European Union, who's also talking about the potential for long war. And if there's any kind of touching of countries, so to speak, because I don't know any other way to put that, in between Russia and any of the NATO partners, you're more than likely to see this bleed out beyond Ukraine. So I think that's the current worry. That's the current thought process. I know that the State Department's in talks from the United States perspective to get this reined in, but the Europeans are unpredictable.
They are, and obviously so is President Putin. However, one thing that is predictable is Russians and war and the longing for the motherland to last forever. Do you think that President Putin seriously wants to end this war?
I'm not sure. They've started expanding where they're purchasing, and I use that term kind of loosely, purchasing fighters from. They've gone into northern Iraq. They're going into very poor areas in Africa as well, and they're making promises for jobs, but a lot of people are ending up on the front lines, and this is ending up in Reddit as well as on TikToks, where people are like, I thought I was getting a job in Russia, but here I am fighting the Ukrainians. And they seem to have an unending supply of cannon fodder that they're willing to pump into this algorithm. So, Ukraine is already at its last legs, pushing grandmothers into the field, running drone warfare and that kind of a thing. We continue to buttress them with aircraft and medium range missiles, ruling out long range missiles because we don't want this turning into World War III. But there doesn't really seem to be some sort of, key element that would bring both sides to the table to really kind of solve this. And I think that's what President Trump would like to push for next.
Yes, and big developments over the past couple of days is this massive weapon that apparently has a nuclear-powered engine in it that can last flying around and surviving. We've been hearing about this coming for quite some time. We don't know whether it's true or not. These are pictures next to us. Yeah,
it's true. The United States tried to build one of these in the 1950s. Okay, basically what this is, it's a leaky warhead. It's a warhead that fires and it goes towards a target, and as it's going towards a target, it likes to scatter all sorts of depleted nuclear waste across its path. And the last time that Russia tested one of these things, it managed to kill the ground crew, the flight crew, as well as a number of their allies that were in the path of the test of this thing. So it has been termed by the State Department as probably one of the worst ideas in modern warfare. But it's a threat response.
Well, why is he doing it? Is he trying to put fear into people that Russia has this unmatched weapon? I mean, the US is still trying to get hypersonic weapons happening.
Hypersonic weapons are probably something that's classified at this juncture, so I won't speak to that. But look, if you have just demonstrated the ability of a weapon that you could just fire that's going to rain hell down and cause long-term nuclear, fallout problems for most of Europe, you've basically made a statement that's Europe, if you come and attack us, we can potentially use this. And while it may not detonate in your airspace, it's going to rain down enough terror that, you're going to have birth defects and all sorts of problems for at least 30 years.
Yes, definitely one to watch. So the fact that Russia is refusing to consider a ceasefire, how does it shape the outlook for this conflict? And how does President Trump deal with this? Because more sanctions, I'm surprised that there are any sanctions left. When I hear more sanctions on Russia, I think, why weren't these placed in the first place? Why is it being drip fed? Why were Russian businesses still able to do business in the United States? Why is this a new thing?
Well, a lot of this is hinging on two things. One is eastern Ukraine, and the second is Crimea. Now, Crimea was taken under the Obama administration, and so the problem is that a decade later, we're now having these conversations where Zelensky's like, "I want all my toys back," and Russia's like, "You can't have your toys back; those are my toys now." And that seems to be the big crux of like where there's a difference of negotiating perspectives at the table. Ukraine wants status quo pre-war. Russia says, well, you've lost multiple things through multiple phases of this war. Maybe we should talk about a different phase. And that's where there's a lack of détente. What I think is going to come from this, because this is a lot of bravado from Russia, is we will get to a conversation. The question is, what is that conversation?
Yeah, what is it and when will it actually happen? What do they actually want out of all of this other than to constantly be Jan Brady screaming Marsha, Marsha, Marsha at the United States every 10 years, which is how it feels. All right, let's move on. With Bitcoin on the rise and global markets bracing for a pivotal week of Fed and Bank of Japan rate decisions, all eyes are now on how these forces will reshape investor sentiment. Oz, Bitcoin is back up again. It feels like every month it drops, it goes back up again, but so does gold.
So does gold. Gold pushing over 4,000 right now. I think the big news this week is most cryptos are trading higher at this point. Bitcoin, when I checked it this morning, was between 115 and 116K. We're expecting Powell's comments on the Federal Reserve's quantitative tightening program to be sort of pivotal to what happens next. And then there's also this group of stocks called the Mag 7. If you haven't been paying attention to that, those are most of your AI stocks. The spending related to these tying up right before a Trump-Xi summit could also be the next phase of really sort of easing inside of the crypto markets. So with all of these things on the agenda for the week, I think we're in a pretty positive position for Bitcoin breaking through the 120 barrier again, and at the same point in time, a return to sort of a bull cycle.
We keep talking about crypto confidence every time it drops and then comes back up again. I feel like the teleprompter says the same thing every few weeks. Are we past it now? Is this just really part of the realization that this is what crypto does?
I think it's more of realizing that these are volatile currencies, right? So, and most people who or millennial or Gen Z don't remember this, but Europe.
Well, hang on. What was with the sigh? You said people who are Gen Z.
Because you've never had to deal with this. You never had to deal with like, oh, I went to Europe. I've got 7 different currencies in my coin purse, which we don't carry in America. Having to spend these across 7 different countries that I've gone through in one day. That's really what you're looking at. You're looking at crypto being in a position that's very similar to the volatility that we had in 1992 through 1994 with, the franc, the pound, and the Deutschmark, as well as, some of the other currencies that I won't mention because no one will remember them. But that's really where we are right now. I think it's a parallel to what we had previously, and it's a big opportunity forward.
All right, let's talk about the Fed's rate cut expected this week. Obviously, we've had some unusual news over the past week. It seems like everything is two speed at the moment. You'll have employment numbers saying one thing, state of the economy saying the other, and then Trump saying something completely differently. What do you think Powell will do? Will he surprise investors?
I think Jay Powell is going to come in and we're pushing for quantitative easing. And I think the rate cuts will start. Now, where that leads us from here is a big question, right? Because we can see a strengthening of the dollar against the pound, against the euro. We're already seeing tremendous amounts of issues in Europe right now, not just from a debt ceiling perspective, but from a NATO perspective. And now this perspective of, are we going to be in war with Russia? So all of those things, I think, are hinting towards a stronger dollar. I think they're hinting towards stronger crypto markets. And at the same point in time, it's still, again, very big questions for what's happening in Europe and how this affects international markets.
It certainly is. All right, we'll leave it there for now. Sultan, appreciate your insights anytime as always. Thank you.
Thank you.